Ma'am, you can't sit there. The words landed harder than they should have. Not loud, not angry, just cold. The kind of cold that made nearby conversations stop for a second. The kind that made people look up from their phones. The restaurant fell quiet. Not completely, just enough. Enough for everyone to hear. Enough for everyone to pretend they hadn't. Evelyn Carter stood beside the window table, one hand resting on the back of a leather chair. 72 years old. Silver hair. Simple navy coat. No jewelry except a thin wedding band she still wore 15 years after losing her husband. She blinked once, then looked at the young woman standing in front of her. Rachel Monroe, floor manager, 31. Perfect makeup, perfect posture, perfect smile. The kind of smile that disappeared the moment nobody important was watching. I'm sorry, Evelyn asked gently. Rachel folded her arms. That table is reserved. Evelyn glanced toward the empty seat. Oh, a small smile touched her lips. I'm only waiting for my son. Rachel didn't smile back. So you'll need to wait somewhere else. Several customers exchanged glances. A waiter carrying water slowed slightly, then kept walking. Nobody wanted trouble, especially not restaurant trouble. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Evelyn Carter didn't look important. That was the problem. No designer handbag. No security detail. No expensive watch. Just an elderly woman carrying a worn purse and standing alone. People often judge what they see. And sometimes, what they don't see matters far more. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. The afternoon sky hung low over downtown Atlanta. Inside, warm lights reflected across polished floors and crystal wine glasses. The restaurant smelled of fresh bread and roasted garlic. Comforting, elegant, expensive. Rachel pointed toward a bench near the entrance. You can sit over there. The tone wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. Evelyn hesitated, only for a second, then nodded. Of course. No argument. No complaint. No scene. She picked up her purse and started walking. Slowly, gracefully, as though preserving someone else's dignity instead of her own. The waiter noticed. So did the hostess. So did an older couple celebrating an anniversary near the fireplace. Nobody said anything. That was the strange part. Sometimes cruelty doesn't need applause. Silence is enough. Evelyn reached the bench near the door and sat down. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked through the rain-streaked window. Waiting. Patient. Calm. The way mothers often wait. Without realizing that somewhere across the city, a black SUV had just pulled away from a glass corporate tower. And the man inside had no idea that his mother had just been humiliated. Not yet. But by tomorrow morning, everyone in this restaurant would. The rain had eased by the time Evelyn Carter checked her watch. 5:15. Her son was late. That wasn't unusual. Not anymore. 20 years ago, Daniel Carter had never been late for anything. Not soccer games. Not school concerts. Not Sunday dinners. Back then, he had been just another boy racing through the neighborhood on a bicycle that was always missing a reflector. Now he ran one of the largest logistics companies in Georgia. People waited for him. Entire boards waited for him. Governors returned his calls. Investors rearranged schedules for him. Success had changed many things. But not everything. Every Friday, no matter how busy he became, he still tried to have dinner with his mother. Tried. The word mattered. Because lately life had become complicated. Acquisitions, lawsuits, expansion projects, endless meetings. The kind of responsibilities that quietly stole time before anyone noticed it was gone. Evelyn didn't complain. Mothers rarely do. She simply waited. Near the hostess stand, Rachel Monroe glanced toward the entrance again, then toward the elderly woman. Still there. Still waiting. Something about it irritated her. Not because Evelyn had done anything wrong. Because she hadn't. People like Rachel often understood confrontation. They knew how to respond to anger, to complaints, to demands. But kindness made them uncomfortable, especially when they knew they hadn't earned it. A young waitress approached carefully. Should I bring her some tea? Rachel looked up. What? The lady by the door. Rachel followed her gaze. Oh, the single syllable carried enough meaning. The waitress hesitated. She's been sitting there almost 40 minutes. Rachel straightened a stack of menus. If she wants something, she can order something. The waitress looked unconvinced. But table 6 needs service. Conversation over. The young woman nodded and walked away. Still, she glanced back once. Interesting. Very interesting. Because not everyone in the restaurant saw Evelyn the same way. An older busboy named Frank had noticed her almost immediately. 70 years old himself. Bad knees. Good heart. The kind of employee nobody remembered until something broke. Frank understood loneliness. He understood waiting. And he understood what it looked like when someone was being treated unfairly. A few minutes later, he quietly carried a cup of hot tea toward the entrance. Evelyn looked surprised. "Oh, you look cold," Frank said. The steam rose softly between them. Evelyn smiled. The genuine kind. The kind that reached her eyes. "Thank you." Frank shrugged. "My wife always said tea fixes most things." That made Evelyn laugh. A small laugh. But real. Smart woman. The smartest. For a moment, silence settled comfortably between them. Not awkward. Not forced. Just human. Then Frank glanced toward Rachel. Lowered his voice. "Not everyone here agrees with how you've been treated." Evelyn followed his gaze. Rachel was speaking with another manager near the bar. Busy. Confident. Unaware. Evelyn stirred the tea slowly. The spoon clicked softly against porcelain. "It's all right." Frank frowned. "No, ma'am. It really is." She looked out the window. Rainwater slid down the glass in silver lines. "Sometimes people are fighting battles we can't see." Frank stared at her. Most people would have been angry, embarrassed, humiliated. Yet somehow she seemed concerned for everyone except herself. "You're kinder than most." Evelyn smiled. "My husband used to say kindness is cheapest when you need it least." Frank thought about that long after he walked away. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel Carter finally ended his meeting. The conference room on the 43rd floor emptied. Slowly, executives gathered tablets. Assistants collected reports. A giant screen displayed quarterly projections. Nobody looked happy. Growth was strong. Investors were pleased. But Daniel wasn't paying attention anymore. His gaze had drifted toward his phone. 3 missed calls. Not from investors. Not from lawyers. From his mother. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Evelyn never called more than once. She hated interrupting people. Always had. Daniel picked up the phone immediately. The call connected on the second ring. "Mom." The warmth in his voice surprised the assistant standing nearby. Most people only knew Daniel Carter as a CEO. Cold. Focused. Demanding. But parents often know a different version of someone. A truer version. "Hello, sweetheart." Relief crossed his face. "There you are. You sound busy." "I am." A pause. Then a smile. "But not too busy." Evelyn looked down at the tea in her hands. Still warm. Frank's kindness lingering in every sip. "Are you still coming?" Daniel glanced at his watch. His expression tightened. The traffic. The delayed meeting. The missed calls. Everything clicked together at once. His stomach sank. "I'm so sorry." "You don't need to apologize." "Mom, I know how hard you work." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. That was the problem. She always understood. Even when she shouldn't. Especially when she shouldn't. "Stay where you are," he said. "I'm leaving right now." Evelyn smiled softly. "I'll be here." Neither of them knew that someone standing behind the hostess station had overheard part of the conversation. Rachel. And for the first time all afternoon, a strange feeling touched the edge of her confidence. She didn't know why. Not yet. But something about the way that elderly woman spoke. The calm. The dignity. The complete absence of bitterness. It felt different. And somewhere deep inside her, a very small voice whispered a question. "What if you've made a mistake?" Rachel ignored it. Some mistakes don't feel like mistakes. Until the next day, Daniel Carter arrived 23 minutes later. Not because he wanted to. Because Atlanta traffic had other ideas. The black SUV pulled up beside the restaurant. Curbed just after 6. Rain still clung to the streets. Storefront lights reflected across wet pavement like streaks of gold. Inside the restaurant, dinner service had reached its peak. Glasses clinked. Servers moved quickly between tables. Conversations rose and fell like waves. Nobody paid much attention when the SUV stopped outside. At first. Then the driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and several heads turned. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Daniel Carter was one of those people who appeared regularly on television. Business magazines. Billboards. Podcasts. The kind of face people recognized before they realized why. 6'2". Dark tailored suit. Silver watch. Calm eyes. The confidence that comes from carrying responsibility every day for 20 years. Daniel entered the restaurant and immediately began scanning the room. Not looking for executives. Not looking for investors. Looking for his mother. He found her near the entrance. Still sitting on the same bench. Still holding the same cup of tea. Still smiling. His chest tightened. Something about that image felt wrong. Deeply wrong. A 72-year-old woman waiting alone beside the door while half the restaurant sat empty. Daniel crossed the room. Evelyn. Her face brightened immediately. There it was. The smile. The one no amount of money could buy. Hello, sweetheart. He bent down and kissed her cheek. Several nearby customers noticed. Then recognized him. Then looked back toward Evelyn. Interesting. Very interesting. Because realization travels faster than sound. Suddenly people were seeing her differently. Not because she had changed. Because information had. Daniel sat beside her. You shouldn't be sitting here. Evelyn laughed softly. I seem to be managing. I'm serious. I'm aware. He studied her face. The same way he used to when he was a child trying to determine whether she was upset. The same way he did after his father died. The same way he still did now. Something felt off. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just enough. What happened? Nothing happened. The answer came too quickly. Daniel noticed. Children spend years learning their parents. Parents spend decades learning. Their children. Neither side ever completely loses the skill. Evelyn. She looked away. Toward the rain. Toward the traffic. Anywhere except directly at him. Interesting. Very interesting. Because that was exactly what she did whenever she was protecting someone. Not herself. Someone else. Before Daniel could ask again, a waiter approached. Frank. The older busboy turned accidental hero. Good evening, sir. Daniel nodded politely. Good evening. Frank hesitated. Then glanced toward Evelyn. Then toward Rachel near the hostess stand. Something flickered across his face. A decision. The kind that takes only a second to make and years to live with. Your mother has been waiting a long time. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Not angry. Just resigned. Frank continued. And she wasn't allowed to sit at her table. The restaurant suddenly felt quieter. Not silent, but quieter. The way a room changes when everyone senses something important is about to happen. Daniel looked at Frank. Then at Evelyn. Then toward Rachel. Rachel froze. For the first time all evening. Actually froze. Because Daniel Carter wasn't looking through her. He was looking directly at her. The manager felt her stomach tighten. A sensation she hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Not because she thought she would lose her job. Because suddenly she wasn't sure she was right. Daniel turned back to Frank. What do you mean? Frank swallowed. Carefully. I mean she was asked to move. Evelyn spoke immediately. It's fine. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. Not fully. His attention had narrowed. Focused. Precise. Dangerously calm. The kind of calm that often appears before powerful people make important decisions. Mom. His voice softened. Tell me exactly what happened. A long pause followed. The rain tapped against the windows. A server dropped a spoon somewhere near the kitchen. Nobody seemed to breathe. Finally, Evelyn smiled. The same gentle smile. The same patient smile. The same smile that had carried Daniel through childhood heartbreaks, college failures, and business disasters. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Another pause. Then Evelyn reached over and squeezed his hand. Warm. Steady. Comforting. As if she were the one helping him. Not the other way around. Daniel. He looked at her. I don't want anyone punished. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she hadn't said nobody did anything wrong. She'd only said she didn't want punishment. Daniel heard the difference. So did Frank. So did Rachel. Rachel felt heat crawl slowly up her neck. She suddenly remembered every word she'd said. Every glance. Every assumption. And for the first time all day, they sounded different. Much different. Daniel leaned back slightly. Thinking. Processing. Observing. His father used to say that the smartest executives weren't the ones who spoke first. They were the ones who listened longest. So Daniel listened. He noticed the untouched tables. The uncomfortable employees. The way Frank refused to leave. The way Rachel refused to approach. Tiny details. Small things. Pieces of a larger picture. Then his eyes settled on the cup of tea. Who brought this? Frank raised a hand. I did. Daniel smiled. A genuine smile. Thank you. Frank blinked. Caught off guard. It wasn't much. It was enough. Something shifted in the old man's expression. Not pride. Something deeper. Recognition. The kind that comes when kindness is noticed. Across the room, Rachel watched everything. And a new feeling began replacing fear. Regret. Because Daniel Carter wasn't acting like the powerful CEO she'd imagined. He wasn't yelling, wasn't threatening, wasn't demanding explanations. He was simply paying attention. And sometimes, that can be much worse. 20 minutes later, Daniel helped his mother to her feet. Let's have dinner somewhere else. Evelyn looked surprised. What about this place? Daniel glanced around the restaurant one final time. His expression unreadable. We'll come back. He said it quietly, almost casually. But something in his voice made Rachel's heart sink. Because it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a plan. And by the time the SUV disappeared into the rainy Atlanta evening, Rachel Monroe could no longer shake the feeling that tomorrow was going to be very different from today. The next morning began with an unusual silence. Not the peaceful kind, the waiting kind. The kind that settles over a place when people know something is coming but don't know what. Rachel Monroe felt it the moment she stepped into the restaurant. The lobby looked exactly the same. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the polished reception desk. Nothing had changed. Yet somehow, everything felt different. Interesting. Very interesting. Because guilt has a way of changing a room even when nobody else knows it's there. Rachel dropped her purse inside her office and checked the day's reservations. Her routine, her comfort zone, her escape. But her concentration lasted less than 30 seconds. Every time she looked down at the computer screen, she saw Evelyn Carter, sitting quietly on that bench, holding a cup of tea, smiling after being humiliated. The memory wouldn't leave. At 10 o'clock, Frank arrived for his shift. The old busboy pushed through the employee entrance carrying his usual lunch container. Rachel spotted him immediately. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Frank nodded politely. Morning. Rachel nodded back. Morning. Another silence. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Finally Rachel asked, Did you know who she was? Frank paused. No. Rachel frowned. Then why did you help her? The old man looked genuinely confused. As opposed to what? The answer landed harder than she expected. Frank adjusted his name tag. My mother used to say something. Rachel waited. If kindness depends on who someone is, it isn't kindness. Then he walked away, leaving Rachel standing alone. Interesting. Very interesting. Because sometimes the simplest sentences cut the deepest. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel Carter sat inside his corner office overlooking downtown Atlanta. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Cars moved below like tiny streams of light. Normally he loved the view. Today he barely noticed it. A tablet rested on his desk. The restaurant's website filled the screen. Customer reviews, management profiles, employee records. Daniel wasn't looking for revenge. At least that's what he kept telling himself. But something about yesterday wouldn't let go. Not because of the table. Not because of the embarrassment. Because of the principle. His mother had spent her entire life teaching him one lesson. Treat people with dignity. Everyone. The janitor. The waitress. The CEO. The stranger. Everyone. And yesterday someone had failed that test. Badly. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. His executive assistant entered carrying a folder. Sir. Daniel looked up. What is it? The information you requested. She placed the folder on his desk. Daniel opened it. Inside were employee profiles, schedules, performance reviews, including one for Rachel Monroe. Interesting. Very interesting. Because what he found wasn't what he expected. Rachel wasn't cruel. At least not on paper. Excellent performance. Strong leadership. 5 years with the company. No complaints. No disciplinary actions. Nothing. Yet somehow, yesterday still happened. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking. His father used to say something. Good people aren't measured by their best days. They're measured by their worst ones. And Rachel Monroe had just shown everyone hers. Meanwhile, Rachel's day continued getting worse. At noon she received an email. Simple. Professional. Short. The sender made her stomach drop. Carter Logistics. Subject line, private meeting request. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. No explanation. No details. No context. Just a meeting. Rachel stared at the screen. Her heartbeat quickened. Interesting. Very interesting. Because uncertainty often scares people more than consequences. Was she being sued? Investigated? Reported? She had no idea. The rest of the afternoon crawled. Customers came and went. Orders were delivered. Tables were cleaned. Everything looked normal. Yet Rachel felt like she was walking through water. Slow. Heavy. Exhausting. Around 4 o'clock, she finally called her younger sister. Emily answered immediately. You sound stressed. Rachel laughed weakly. I am. What happened? Rachel hesitated, then told the story. Not all of it. Just enough. When she finished, silence filled the line. A long silence. Then Emily asked, would you have treated her differently if you knew she was his mother? Rachel closed her eyes. The question hit exactly where it was supposed to, because she knew the answer. Of course she would have. That was the problem. Emily sighed softly. Then maybe this isn't about the CEO. Rachel stared out her office window. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is about who you thought she was. The words lingered. Long after the call ended. Long after the restaurant emptied. Long after the sun disappeared beyond the city skyline. That evening, Daniel drove to his mother's house. A small brick home in a quiet neighborhood. The same house where he grew up. The same porch where she waited for him after school. The same kitchen where she packed thousands of lunches. Nothing fancy. Nothing impressive. Just home. Evelyn was watering flowers when he arrived. The golden light of sunset wrapped around her silver hair. Daniel watched for a moment before speaking. You never told me everything. She smiled without turning around. You came to interrogate me? I came because something doesn't make sense. Evelyn set down the watering can. Daniel. He folded his arms. Why didn't you complain? The question hung between them. Simple. Honest. Important. Evelyn looked toward the roses. Her late husband's favorites. Then she answered quietly. Because everyone is fighting something. Daniel frowned. That's not an excuse. No. She agreed. It's a reason. Daniel remained silent. Evelyn turned toward him. I wasn't worried about myself. Then what were you worried about? She smiled sadly. The kind of person she becomes if nobody teaches her better. The word stopped him cold. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Daniel had spent the entire day thinking about accountability. His mother was thinking about redemption. Two very different things. The evening breeze moved softly through the garden. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Evelyn picked up the watering can again. What are you planning? Daniel watched her carefully, then smiled. A small smile. A dangerous smile. The kind that meant a decision had already been made. I'm going to meet her. Evelyn's hands paused. And then, Daniel looked toward the fading sunset. The answer came quietly, so she can understand what she actually did. Back across the city, Rachel sat alone in her apartment, the email glowing on her laptop screen. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. She read it again, then again, and again, unable to shake the feeling that her life was about to change. The question was only how much. The next morning arrived too quickly. Rachel Monroe barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. An elderly woman sitting alone by the entrance, holding a cup of tea, smiling, not angry, not bitter, just kind. And somehow that made everything worse. At 8:45 a.m., Rachel stood inside the lobby of Carter Logistics headquarters. The building towered above downtown Atlanta like a monument to success. Glass, steel, power. People moved through the lobby carrying laptops and coffee cups. Everyone looked busy, important, focused. Rachel had never felt smaller. Interesting. Very interesting. Because yesterday, she had judged someone based on appearance. Today she was experiencing what it felt like to stand somewhere and feel invisible. A receptionist escorted her upstairs. Floor 43. Executive level. The elevator seemed to move too slowly and too quickly at the same time. When the doors opened, Rachel found herself standing before a large office overlooking the city. The assistant smiled politely. Mr. Carter will see you now. Rachel stepped inside. Daniel Carter stood near the window, hands in his pockets. The Atlanta skyline stretched behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel gestured toward a chair. Please sit. Rachel obeyed. Her hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel remained standing. Not intimidating. Not aggressive. Simply calm. And somehow that felt harder. Finally he spoke. Do you know why you're here? Rachel swallowed. I think so. Daniel nodded. Tell me. The silence stretched. Rachel looked down, then answered honestly. Because I treated your mother badly. Daniel studied her face, looking for something. Not fear. Not excuses. The truth. After a moment, he sat across from her. My mother spent 40 years teaching elementary school. Rachel blinked. She hadn't expected that. Daniel continued. Every child who walked into her classroom mattered. His voice remained steady. Didn't matter if their parents were rich. Didn't matter if they were poor. Rachel listened quietly. She packed lunches for kids who forgot theirs. A faint smile appeared. Bought winter coats without telling anyone. He looked toward the window. She taught me that dignity isn't something you earn. His eyes returned to hers. It's something every person already deserves. Rachel felt her throat tighten, because she already knew where this was going. And because he was right. Daniel opened a small folder. Inside was a photograph. He slid it across the desk. Rachel looked down. The picture showed a much younger Daniel, maybe 10 years old, standing beside Evelyn, both smiling, both covered in mud. Rachel looked confused. Daniel laughed softly. Community garden project. For the first time since entering the office, some warmth entered the room. My mother made me spend every Saturday helping. Rachel stared at the photo. The image felt strangely ordinary. Not the family of a billionaire CEO. Just a mother and son. Just people. Daniel leaned forward. You know what bothers me most? Rachel shook her head. It wasn't that you moved her. His answer surprised her. It wasn't even the embarrassment. Daniel paused. It was the assumption. The words landed gently. But they landed. You looked at her and decided her value. Rachel lowered her eyes. Because there was no defense. No explanation. No excuse. Only truth. The room remained quiet. Then Daniel asked a question. One simple question. If you had known she was my mother. Rachel closed her eyes. The same question Emily had asked. The same question she had been avoiding. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. I would have treated her differently. Daniel nodded. Not surprised. Not angry. Just sad. Exactly. The word echoed between them. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Rachel did something she hadn't done in years. She stopped defending herself. I'm sorry. Tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Real ones. The kind people cry when they finally see themselves clearly. I wasn't trying to be cruel. Daniel listened. I was stressed. Rachel wiped her eyes. Busy. Another breath. Focused on appearances. She laughed bitterly. And somewhere along the way I forgot how to see people. Daniel sat quietly. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A small smile. The same one Evelyn often wore. My mother said something yesterday. Rachel looked up. She said she wasn't worried about what happened to her. Rachel felt her chest tighten. Daniel continued. She was worried about who you might become if nobody told you the truth. The room fell silent. Completely silent. And for the first time, Rachel understood. The woman she had humiliated hadn't wanted revenge. She had wanted better for her. Interesting. Very interesting. Because kindness often asks more from us than punishment does. An hour later, Rachel stood outside a small brick house. The same house where Daniel grew up. The same house where Evelyn still lived. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the front porch. Daniel had given her a choice. No requirement. No threat. No consequence. Just an opportunity. And now she stood before the door, wondering if she deserved it. The door opened before she could knock. Evelyn smiled, as if she had been expecting her. Hello, Rachel. The younger woman froze. You know my name? Evelyn laughed softly. Daniel talks more than he realizes. Rachel felt tears return immediately. I'm sorry. The words came out broken. Raw. Honest. Evelyn stepped forward. Then did something Rachel never expected. She hugged her. Just hugged her. No lecture. No anger. No humiliation. Only grace. Rachel cried. Really cried. The kind of crying that leaves a person lighter afterward. When they finally separated, Evelyn squeezed her hand. We all have moments we're not proud of. Rachel nodded, still wiping tears. I don't deserve your kindness. Evelyn smiled. My dear. The morning sunlight warmed the porch. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. The neighborhood felt peaceful. Safe. Human. Then Evelyn spoke the words Rachel would remember for the rest of her life. Kindness isn't a reward for good people. She squeezed her hand gently. It's how good people are made. Neither woman spoke after that. They didn't need to. Some lessons arrive loudly. Others arrive quietly and stay forever. Months later, customers at the restaurant began noticing small changes. Managers spent more time helping employees. No one was left waiting by the door. Every guest received the same welcome, the same respect, the same dignity. And near the hostess stand sat a small framed quote. No company logo, no signature, just a simple sentence. The sentence Evelyn Carter had inspired. The way you treat people who can do nothing for you reveals who you truly are. And every time Rachel walked past it, she smiled. Because one rainy afternoon had changed her life. Not through power, not through wealth, Not through fear, but through kindness. The very thing she almost failed to recognize.